Welcome back to the Word on Fire show. I'm Brandon Vaught, the host, and joining us, as he does almost every week, is Bishop Robert Barron. Bishop Barron, wonderful to talk with you.
Hey, Brandon. How you doing over there in Orlando?
I'm doing very well. Listen, before we get into the main topic of our show, I wanted to ask you about a recent movie you saw. It's the hit movie and widely acclaimed film, Spider-Man. What did you think about it?
Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was. I've seen a number of them. Not every one of the Spider-Man films. I think it's curious that we keep making that story over. There's something in it, obviously, that people find, archetypal or perennially appealing. What was, as everyone says, what was remarkable about this one was how much of a kid he is. I mean, Spider-Man is clearly just a teenage high school kid with all the kind of typical teenage goofiness and lack of confidence and all of that. So it made it, kind of charming that way. It's a classic sort of coming of age thing. I don't think I'm giving away too much of the plot to say his own self-possession, I think, is part of what the movie is about. That he's able to say at a key moment, I'm not ready. And I think that's a good thing. He's a heroic figure, but it's like a hero in his formative years. And he has the truly heroic capacity to say, no, not yet. I'm not there yet. I kind of admired that about the movie. It was it's like a Bildungsroman in some ways. It's this sort of coming of age story, but it doesn't follow the typical arc.
We're recording this episode a few days before you and the Word on Fire production team head off to both Italy and France. You're going to continue filming the second round of our Pivotal Players film series. This trip, you're going to be focusing especially on St. Benedict and St. Augustine. So we're going to talk about that filming trip coming up. But before we do, I wanted to mention a special link here. If you go to this link for all of our listeners and you sign up with your email address, you're going to get exclusive behind-the-scenes videos from the filming of this trip. So go to wordonfireshow.com/videos. Again, it's wordonfireshow.com/videos. Sign up with your email address, and we're going to send you special behind-the-scenes videos from this round of Pivotal Players filming. Okay, Bishop, let's first, before we get into the locations you're going to be at, let's briefly look at each of these two figures. We'll do whole Word on Fire show episodes on them later on, but give us a brief sketch of first St. Benedict. Why is he a pivotal player?
Oh, gosh. In some ways, I'm kind of going out on a limb here, but in some ways, he's the most pivotal of all the pivotal players we're studying in the series, because Benedict is responsible, really more than anybody else I can think of, for the revival of civilization after the collapse of the Roman Empire, and therefore for the preservation of classical civilization. Why do we know anything about classical civilization today? Why do we have Aristotle, Plato, Aeschylus, Cicero? It's because monks, mostly of the Benedictine tradition, preserved this literature. Furthermore, Benedict founds the movement which effectively re-civilizes Europe after the fall of Rome. So he looks back in a way toward the preservation of classical civilization, and he looks forward to the formation of European culture. So, without Benedict, we don't have Michelangelo, we don't have Chesterton, we don't have Newman, we don't have Thomas Aquinas. So he's and that word pivotal really applies to him, doesn't it? He's a cardinal, he's a hinge figure, maybe more than any other figure that we're studying.
I've done a little bit of reading on Benedict, and I wrote a chapter about him in my little Saints and Social Justice book. And one thing that struck me about him was he never really seemed to have the sense of the monumental legacy that he was going to leave behind. Isn't that right?
Yeah, and that's, I just preached on this the other day, the mustard seed principle or the leaven principle, that you live the life as you feel God's calling you to live it, and you don't really worry inordinately about the grand implications, the full scene. Leave that to God. It's someone who's faithful to the call. If you had said to Saint Benedict in his lifetime, do you think that you're actually going to be responsible for the re-civilization of Europe? I probably would look at you with complete puzzlement. He's trying to keep his monastery together, So that's the mustard seed principle, is for all of us. Don't fuss about so much the grand legacy. Discern what God is calling you to do, and then do it with a complete devotion. The Mother Teresa line, I don't worry about success, worry about fidelity. I think that applies in his case.
One more thing on Benedict that has always struck me is, he was beloved by many of his followers, but like many great saints, I'm thinking of St. John of the Cross in particular, his own brothers and followers persecuted him. I think they tried to poison him. Talk about how, like, for the life of the saint, they're not universally beloved in their own time.
Oh, often on the contrary, because a saint's always a sign of contradiction, right? And anyone that follows Christ seriously, and we all know that, anyone that is attempting, however inadequately, to follow Christ faithfully will always excite opposition. And it's the pattern of the cross, which is essential to Christian life, you know. So if you think you're just going to sail through your life effortlessly, boy, especially if you're trying to follow the Lord, you're going to face trial, difficulty. And a lot of the saints have said some version of the line that we suffer more from people inside the church than outside the church. You know, that's often the case. But it's the pattern of the cross that's written into Christian life.
Let's change gears and talk a little bit about the other pivotal player you're focusing on during this filming trip here. It is St. Augustine. Why is Augustine a pivotal player?
Oh my gosh, why isn't he? I mean, Augustine, not only one of the great figures in Christianity, he's simply one of the great figures in Western civilization, period. Master of the Latin language. I mean, you'd rank him with Cicero and Ovid and people like that. Inventor of the genre of autobiography. Just think of that as a literary and psychological achievement. And we take it so for granted that people, you write about your own life, but no one had done that. Certainly in the way he did, no one had done that before. So he invents autobiography. While he's at it, he invents the philosophy of history. So here's a branch of philosophy that we all take for granted, but no one did it before Augustine did it. Arguably the first really great psychologist in the West. So, you know, Freud and company are really unthinkable. Shakespeare's soliloquies are unthinkable apart from Augustine's Confessions. Now add to the fact that he's founder of a religious community and someone who lives the Christian life at a heroically virtuous level. Any one of those achievements would guarantee his perpetual importance. Now combine them all in one person. He's one of the most staggering people that's ever lived, period. So, I mean, how could you not talk about Augustine?
Augustine is often contrasted with another of your great heroes, Thomas Aquinas, you know, especially in the realm of evangelization, apologetics. There's the Thomistic approach, which tends to be more rational, and then the Augustinian approach, which maybe is more experiential. Do you think Augustine is especially appealing in today's sort of relativistic world?
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime people are interested in that struggle, the yearning, the interior restlessness, I mean, that just sings out of St. Augustine. Thomas, you know, is much more rationalistic in his self-presentation. At the same time, as especially in recent years, Thomists have been pointing out like mad, Thomas is deeply Augustinian, I mean, deeply marked by Augustine. If you had suggested to Thomas Aquinas that he was somehow at odds with St. Augustine, it would have struck him, I think, as absolutely bizarre. You know, Augustine's more Platonic, sure, but heck, Aquinas is deeply Platonic, even as he remains an Aristotelian in his basic orientation, but he's deeply Platonic at the same time. So I think those distinctions, you know, academics love them, and in the popular realm, everybody loves sharp distinctions. But the higher you go, the deeper you go, the more these things sort of get obscured in a good way. You know, differences in style, and that's okay. Some people are more rationalistic. They love that sort of thing. Other people, you know, rational arguments just don't sing to them. The beauty of someone like Augustine, man, you want rational arguments? He's got a lot of them. You want high metaphysics? It's all over the place. But you also want intense introspective psychology. You also want a deep spirituality. It's all over Augustine. Often these three things on the same page of, let's say, the Confessions or the De Trinitate or the City of God. So, I mean, he's such a man in full. I mean, Augustine, there's so much going on in him. His only serious rival as a theologian would be Aquinas. But, you know, and no one's ever accused me of underestimating Thomas Aquinas, but Augustine, there's something, I think, even richer and broader in his personality.
Well, Bishop Barron is a couple days away from leaving for Italy and France to continue the filming of our Pivotal Players series. Again, if you want to stay up to date with behind-the-scenes videos from that filming, visit the website wordonfireshow.com/videos, wordonfireshow.com/videos. Sign up. You get on a special email list where we'll send you videos throughout the entire trip. Bishop, let's talk through some of the places that you're going to be visiting. So your first stop is in Rome, where you're going to be filming at, among other places, the Piazza di Campidoglio. Hope I said that right. What's there, and what are some other spots in Rome that are significant to these two figures?
Well, Rome is important for Augustine for a lot of reasons, but one is he's coming from Africa. He leaves to pursue his career as a rhetorician, and he first stops in Rome, and he's there for a while. Moving in Manichaean circles. So it's before he's a Christian. And then he got sort of tired of that for different reasons and made his way up to Milan. So we'll be filming there as well. But he spends time in Rome. And then on his way back to Africa, he comes through Rome and then goes to Ostia, which was the port city of Rome. We know it now as Ostia Antica. And it's quite a bit inland. It's silted over, from Augustine's time. We're also in Rome for Benedict for different reasons. And part of the filming is to find just beautiful, visually compelling places to do some of these stand-ups. So the Campidoglio is a good example. The Campidoglio is the top of the Capitoline Hill. So it goes back to ancient times. And there was a great temple to Jupiter on the top of the Capitoline. Now, since then, it's become this wonderfully Christian place. And the piazza there was designed by Michelangelo, and it's one of the most beautiful public spaces in Europe. So that's why we're there, I think, is just to get that visual. And I think maybe if I remember this right, see, this is the director's decision of where we film these different sections, because with Augustine, we're talking a lot about the fall of Rome, because he writes The City of God in response to the charge that Rome fell because of Christianity. And so Augustine is a kind of a hinge figure there, the end of the Roman Empire, the beginning of Christian Europe. And so I think we might be there as I'm meditating on that whole dynamic.
Most people know Augustine as Augustine of Hippo, but we're not filming in Hippo, isn't that right?
Yeah, and I just made a prudential judgment that I think to go to those lands now, which I'd love to do to see those places, but I think it's just a little bit dicey to be bringing a Christian film crew into that part of the world. I just think it was a little too dangerous. So we'll see if we can get some film crews on the ground there that could do some filming for us. But I decided not to bring the team there.
Where's Hippo? Where would that be modern day?
Yeah, it's I always get mixed up whether it's Tunisia or Algeria. It's one of the two. Because Carthage and Hippo in the ancient time they're quite near each other. And one's in Tunisia, one's in Algeria. And I always get them mixed up. But they're on that North African, near the coast. And of course, it was a very prominent, prosperous Roman province back in Augustine's time.
So a lot of cool Augustine sites in Rome. Also in Rome, though, you're going to be filming at Monte Cassino. In fact, I think you're there for a whole day. So that must be of great importance, isn't it?
It is. Of course, Monte Cassino is a great spot. It's south of Rome, about an hour or so drive from Rome. We were there already for the Aquinas episode because the very young Thomas Aquinas, as a kid, is brought to Monte Cassino. And he was being prepared for a Benedictine life. And of course, he left that and became a Dominican. But Monte Cassino is in some ways the great mother church of the Benedictine movement, because it's where Benedict establishes his first great monastery. After, he spent time as a hermit, living literally in a cave, and then small groups kind of gathering around him. But it was Monte Cassino was the first really important monastic establishment. And he's buried there, along with his sister, St. Scholastica. So anyway, it's a striking, beautiful place. The current architecture is actually Baroque, and it was rebuilt completely after World War II because largely American planes destroyed Monte Cassino. And so we made a commitment to rebuild it. And it was rebuilt just as it was. So it's a Baroque, I think Bernini-inspired architectural program. But it goes way, way back. Through the Middle Ages that Thomas would have known, then all the way back to Benedict's time. And it's I was very struck when I was there for the first time how high it is. You go way up on this quite high elevation, Monte Cassino. And it really is a monte, Beautiful, striking, spiritually vibrant place.
Give us a sense of the Benedictine life. So I assume there's still Benedictine monks there at Monte Cassino. What's unique about their spiritual form?
Well, at Monte Cassino itself, there's only a handful of monks that are actually there living the life. But we're going to be going actually all over the Benedictine world. That's, I think, the charm of this particular episode. We're going to go to places in Europe and in America as well. Benedictine life is famously ora et labora, right? It's prayer and work. It's the opus dei is Benedict's term, the work of God, which is the great work of prayer. So gathering at all these different times of day, and then manual labor, or they've adapted it over the centuries to intellectual labor as well, like the copying of manuscripts in the Middle Ages, now teaching and writing, etc. But through work and through prayer, one seeks this intense communion with God. Something that always moves me is it's the Benedictine tradition that when someone comes, they're seeking entry. They're asked a very simple question: what do you seek? What do you want here? And there's only one answer. There's only one right answer, which is I'm seeking God. If you're seeking retreat, or you're seeking exile, or you're seeking protection, or you're seeking to get away from your family, or to please your mother, or anything like that, it's not going to work. It's only if you're truly seeking God that you're going to find joy in a place like that. So I always find that very moving. And as I'll argue in the episode, I think Benedict is of huge importance today.
There's a local Benedictine monastery here in Central Florida. I've gone there a few times for retreat, and one striking feature of it is their emphasis on hospitality. They go all out to welcome you, whether you're a friend, a stranger, whatever.
Yeah, and that's part of the rule, that every guest should be welcomed as Christ. And it's in the rule. And I've always found in my years, I've had a lot of association with Benedictines over the years, both in this country and Europe and around the world. I found that to be true, that they have imbibed that spirit. I remember vividly, this is also in the rule, but they still practice it in France in some of the monasteries. When the guests arrived, the abbot himself came to greet us at dinner, and then he had a little bowl of water and he washed our hands. And that's recommended in the rule, and they still practice it there. And I remember to this day, I of course remember it and find it very moving, that you're being welcomed as Christ himself coming into the community.
Okay, so we're looking at several places you're visiting during your Pivotal Players filming trip here coming up. We've talked a little bit about Rome. We've talked about Monte Cassino. Talk some about Subiaco. Why is that place significant?
Subiaco is so important because it's where, as a young kid, this I think makes Benedict very relevant to our time. He's from a wealthy family, most likely, because they were able to send him to Rome for his studies. And what he found, I think like a lot of spiritually sensitive people down through the ages till today, he found that the life was so offensive. There was so much corruption. There was so much immorality, a lack of seriousness, that he fled. He left the city to seek communion with the Lord in simplicity and poverty, and lived as a hermit. And so in Subiaco, there's this holy cave, they call it. And it's where Benedict lived. And it reminds you there very much of someone like Ignatius of Loyola, who spent that year in a cave in Manresa, and that's the beginning of the Benedictine life, because this hermit, I think without really wanting this, but he became attractive to people, and they came out to seek communion with him and to understand his life. There he's like Anthony of the desert, And then from that original group came this early monastic movement, which then grew in his own lifetime to a place like Monte Cassino. But Subiaco is the birthplace. It's where Benedict's movement begins, and hence you could say Western monasticism begins in that cave. There's our mustard seed principle again, right? This one kid going off to live in a cave because he felt the world had kind of, gone off the rails. But from that decision and from that place came this world-changing movement.
After Subiaco and Monte Cassino, next up is a few days in Milan. What are some of the places you'll film out there?
Well, I've never been to Milan except the airport. I've been through a couple times changing planes. I've never been to Milan, so I'm looking forward to it. The main attraction there, it's Augustine's town. He went to Milan as a young man to seek his fortune, his career as a rhetorician. And while he's in Milan at the cathedral, and the current cathedral, which is it's a Gothic, sort of Italian Gothic form, but it's on the spot where the ancient cathedral was. There is where Augustine hears Ambrose preaching. And it changed his life and therefore changed Western civilization. So I find that very moving. And then it was just really a matter of months later that same Augustine, in the bowels of that ancient cathedral, is baptized by St. Ambrose. So at the Easter Vigil in the year 387, he's baptized. Well, in relatively recent years, they uncovered through archaeological excavation that spot. They've uncovered the baptismal pool with the steps going down into it that would have been used in Ambrose's ancient cathedral. And so with almost complete certitude, we can say, and we're going to film there, on this spot, two great saints of the ancient church stood, one baptizing the other, and thereby changing the whole world. And that's not much of an exaggeration to say. So that's what I'm looking forward to in Milan, especially. Now, I was reminded recently, Father Paul Murray, who's one of my great friends, is visiting in the house. And I said, what else should I see in Milan? He goes, well, go to the Dominican, I don't know if it's called the Studium or what, but where Leonardo's Last Supper is. And I totally forgotten, I must say, that it was there. So I think we're going to try to get in there and see the Last Supper of Leonardo. But the cathedral is my main interest in Milano.
Is the cathedral pretty much the same as it would have been back in the 4th century or so?
Oh, it wouldn't look the same. It's done in as I say, Italian Gothic style. So it's more of a medieval. I don't know, probably in the ancient time, it would have had more of like a Roman basilica structure, I'm guessing. But it wouldn't look much like it, but it's on the same spot. Just as you go to Cologne, and there's that magnificent Gothic church, Aquinas was ordained a priest on that spot, because there was an antecedent church that looked almost nothing, I'm sure, like the great Gothic church. But on that spot, the Aquinas was ordained. So I remember years ago, a good friend of mine, Tom O'Connor, whom I just saw when I was in Ireland, he said to me, "You're very topophilic." I said, what? And he made up this word. Topos means place, and philic is, he said, you're a lover of places. And that's true. I've always liked to go to the place where, someone is buried or something happened. So I am topophilic. And so my topophilia is going to bring me to this spot where Ambrose baptized Augustine.
It strikes me in Catholicism, there's something about our love for relics and places and things. Don't you sense that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're an incarnational religion. And so bodies matter, and where people stood and the towns they lived in, what shaped them. Yes, I think that is very Catholic. The spiritual life is not just a matter of interiority or of moral achievement. There's something very embodied about it. And I've had that in me for a long time. I like going to these places.
Well, after Milan, you then get on a flight for one of your last stops, and it's a big one. It's Paris, France, where you'll visit, among other places, the famous Mont Saint-Michel, which is one of the most mystically beautiful places on planet Earth. Why is that place significant?
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, I lived in France for 3 years. I lived in Paris and traveled widely. But I must say, I had a couple of opportunities, but I never made it to Mont Saint-Michel. And as you say, just from photographs, it's one of the most alluring, beautiful spots on the planet. It's this monastic city, you might say, built on this little promontory off the Normandy coast. And depending on the tides, it's either an island or there's a causeway connecting it to the mainland. But it's just one of the most mystical spots. It was, literally on the edge of the world, like the edge of Europe, a bit like Skellig Michael, off the coast of Ireland, where these monks had an instinct for going to talk about the peripherias, going to the edges and living in total dependence upon God. And so the beauty of it is very Benedictine, but also the edginess of it is Benedictine. So we just thought it'd be a cool place to film some of the meditations on the rule. We also filmed already. Our crew's been over there at Citeaux, at Einsiedeln, at Fongambeau. I think they've been to a number of places, famous Benedictine houses in Europe. So Mont Saint-Michel, I'm lucky. I'm happy that they decided to send me there to do the stand-ups. So I'm really looking forward to that.
We're all so excited to join you along with the ride, Bishop. Even if we can't fly over there with you, we can certainly follow you digitally. Again, visit the website wordonfireshow.com/videos. When you sign up there, we're going to send you special videos throughout the trip. We got all sorts of other cool stuff planned. We're going to be doing Instagram stories, hopefully some Facebook Live videos over there. So lots of really good stuff that you're going to want to stay attuned to. So visit that website, wordonfireshow.com/videos, and join us along for the filming. Well, it's time now for one of our questions from our listeners. Today we get to hear from Ellie, who has an interesting question about Adam and Eve. So here's her question for you, Bishop.
Hi, this is Ellie. I live in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm wondering if our first parents were free from original sin and were in a state of being perfectly ordered to and in relationship with God, how did they have the capacity or the inclination to fall? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good searching question, and a lot of the great minds of the church have kind of mulled that over. Here's a quick answer. Even though they were free of original sin, that's true, and even though they didn't have what we call today concupiscence, or the effects, the after effects of original sin, this tinder, this tendency toward sin. Nevertheless, as finite creatures and free creatures, there's always the possibility of sin, of falling away, unless one is standing utterly, completely in the presence of God, who's the unconditioned good. So, for example, the condition of the saints in heaven. We don't say that the saints are likely to sin or the saints are going to fall away, because they're in the absolute presence of God. So shy of that, as long as you have finitude and freedom, there's always the possibility of falling into this false worship, which I think is the heart of sin. I've argued that now, that's from the Bible and Augustine and many others, that the heart of sin is worshiping a creature rather than the creator. And that remains a possibility as long as we're finite, as long as we're free, as long as we're not utterly in the presence of the absolute good, the way the angels and saints are. So that's a quick answer to your very searching question.
Well, thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Word on Fire show. One final time, be sure to visit this website and sign up for the free behind-the-scenes videos of Bishop Barron's filming trip. The website is wordonfireshow.com/videos. Sign up there. We'll send you all sorts of cool stuff during the next week and a half. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week on the Word on Fire show.